To talk a little bit about this idea of emptiness. You know that when so much is uncertain, and there's a lot that could stir our minds up in all sorts of whirlwinds. Emptiness is something to really search for, and I know everybody knows the feeling of the good kind of emptiness versus the bad kind of emptiness. You know, the good kind of emptiness is like when you clean out your closet and it's clear and easy to see everything, and you're like, oh, job well done, and I got rid of all this stuff that I don't need. That's a very silly example, but it's an example nonetheless of the feeling that you get in your mind and in your body when things are clear. Yesterday morning, early, I was lying down on my grass, and the sky was so blue, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was just this clarity and emptiness, and it felt so good. It felt so good to observe that, and so I think everyone understands what I mean by the impact, the positive impact that emptiness can have. And I just wanted to read just a little something. Rami Shapiro, The Way of Solomon. It's a wonderful book, Finding Joy and Contentment in the Wisdom of the Ecclesiastes, right? I think I'm pronouncing that right. All right, so this is about emptiness. Emptiness, emptiness upon emptiness. The world is fleeting of form, empty of permanence, void of surety, without certainty, like a breath breathed once and gone. All things rise and fall. Understanding emptiness and tranquility replaces anxiety. Understand emptiness and compassion replaces jealousy. Understand emptiness, and you will cease to excuse suffering and begin to alleviate it. And that's it. So I think it's just really profound. Tranquility replaces anxiety. Compassion replaces jealousy. You'll cease to excuse suffering and begin to alleviate it. These are really powerful things that can come to us if we start to really experience the beauty of emptiness within us, the letting go of control of anything that you feel like you're clinging to. All right, so let's go ahead and close our eyes for a moment and just come into the space that you're in. Okay. Find a comfortable seat, or perhaps you're standing, or perhaps you're lying down. And just take a moment to drop in, come into the breath as best as you can, feeling both the inhale and the exhale. And if we want to experience a little bit of emptiness in the breath, the exhale is a beautiful place to hang out in, to know, to understand. So as we take in all this beautiful, fresh, new energy on our inhale, what does it feel like to transform the inhale to the exhale? That little transition as you cease inhaling and before you begin to exhale. This potential that lives there. And then the decision, the release. As you exhale, see how smooth and steady you can get the exhale to be. And this doesn't mean manipulate the breath to the point of tension or strain. And at the very bottom of the exhale, notice that little pause too. So take time. This is typically a very empty place, the bottom of the exhale. And it can be fraught with challenge. You know, if you're a breath holder, if you kind of deny your next inhale, that can be a place that you don't want to linger too long. But if you never pay attention to that place, that empty place, maybe in your practice today, just see what it feels like to have just the moment pause. It's such a tiny little moment where we cease the breath. Just see what's there. What does the body feel like? What does the mind feel like when you live just momentarily in that tiny little gap? And of course, that might mean that you start stretching that gap out a little bit. So be very mindful that you are breathing well, that you're not restraining yourself in any way, that your inhale when it comes is not a gasp or a gulp. You don't want to deny yourself breath, but just see what you can do to pay attention to those two gaps, but especially the exhale and the gap afterwards. As you cascade the exhale out of you, notice what tumbles in your body. Is there anything that releases and lets go? Can you feel a slide, a slippery slide of release in any way? Is there a part of your body that eases during the exhale? Maybe you can feel as though the skin from the base of your skull down your traps to the edges of your shoulders are like a little slippery ski slope where you just slide down on the exhales. Letting any tension that you've built that kind of creeps in unbeknownst to you when your guard is down, or really when your guard is up, right? It creeps in. Just see what you can do to let the exhales teach you that letting go of tension is a really beautiful sensation in the body, one to be experienced, not taken for granted or passed over. And how about the rest of your body? Do you feel your skin loosening on your exhales? Is there something your palms can give away? Or maybe even the bottom of your feet? Is there tension that can release from the eyes, from anywhere along your skull? And when you create this empty space, what are you making room for? What can come? Is there that sense of compassion that can come? Is there that sense that all is well? All right, and then place your palms at your heart and offer an intention for your practice. What are you working with letting go of? And can your breath, can your movements, can your presence in your body and mind give you some capacity in cultivating emptiness? And then let's release the hands and come to lie down on your back. Okay, so as you stretch out on the floor, just see what it feels like to cultivate that sense of tranquility on the exhales, that sense of compassion on the exhales, the ability to be present in this moment, not letting the arrows of the future or the past kind of, let them just walk right on by. Just drop weight into the body. Feel your joints loosen. If you were here yesterday, we did a lot with keeping the joints free to allow breath to move through the body. So just see what it feels like to have loose joints. And then as you begin to have movement, maybe stretching the arms overhead and the joints lose a little bit of their looseness. What do they gain? So as you stretch, what do you gain here? What's here? And then as you exhale, can you bring the knees into the chest and give yourself a hug? And keep breathing. We're going to work a little bit with the spine today. So just notice, how is the condition of your pelvis and sacrum and the relationship of your sacrum to your pelvis, the sacrum being the bottom of your spine. Circle the other way. All right, and then one more time, arms big and wide this time on the floor. Stretch yourself out, open things up. Breathe from your center to your edges, and as you exhale, curl in. Give yourself a strong exhale now. So as we inhale, fill yourself back up. And as you strongly exhale, just a little bit more momentum to that exhale to really push out the last little dregs, whatever it is that you don't need.
10% of your lung capacity, keep going, stays in your lungs, even in your most full exhale. So, that residual is always a little bit there, but just see what you can do to cleanse the lungs, give way so that breath can come in fully and deeply. And the last one, squeeze the belly, chin to chest, all your air out. Keep your air out for a moment and just squeeze everything in your capacity. Space, toes, everything in between. And then relax the breath, put your head back down, put your feet on the floor, and let's start to move some windshield wipers. So feet wide on the ground, dropping knees left, dropping knees right, moving faster than the breath, slower than the breath, with the breath. As long as you're breathing, all is well. Okay, if you want to add some arms to this, great. You can stretch your arms up or out, anything that helps you kind of wake up some of the fascia around your side bodies, around your spine. Just loosening some things up. All right. And then let's go ahead and bring the right knee into the chest. Left leg is long on the floor. If you have a strap handy, make sure you have it close by. Give a good squeeze. Then if you have a scarf or a strap, lift that leg straight up in the air. Okay, so wrapping, if you don't have a strap, that's fine. Just interlace your hands behind your hamstrings somewhere. I want you to get the feeling that the femur bone is drawing way back in the hip joint, like it wants to snuggle up into the very back edge of the hip joint. Stretch up through your foot and down, root down through your femur bone. Just get a little space in the hip itself. Perhaps hold the strap with one hand and take the heel of the other hand right up against the root of the hip and press away. And notice what happens to your back. Release that press and then press again. And just notice, can you notice any spaciousness coming into your lumbar spine when there's some space in your hip joint? Enjoy the hamstring. We're going to open them today. So flex your toes toward your face. Lift your heel up. See if you can get the hamstrings to not only lengthen, but widen. Feel free to move that hand out of there at any time you want. Deep breaths in, deep breaths away. Be careful to not hyperextend your knee. And then we're going to put the left foot into the strap, take the right foot down. Your right foot, by the way, I forgot to mention this on the other side, can be flat on the floor or your leg can be straight, whichever makes your pelvis feel capable of a very neutral place, not rolling into a posterior tilt. All right, so press the femur bone away. Perhaps you want to hold the strap with one hand and just get a sense of healing the heel of the other hand deep into the hip joint, pressing the thigh bone back. Stretch up through your foot, down through your hip. Notice any spaciousness that happened in your lumbar spine when you press the femur bone away. And go ahead and release that press. 2 hands on the strap. Just enjoy the opening of the back of your leg. Flex your toes toward your face. Maybe you want to do a little flexi points, where you're kind of moving a little bit. All is well, whatever you're choosing to do. Move the heel up toward the sky. Soften the knee so that you're not pushing the knee back. Root the head of the femur bone down, down, down as you lift the heel up, up, up. The spine stays long. How's your breath? Are you paying attention to the exhales, that little gap? And then let's release that leg down onto the floor. Roll over onto your side and come up onto your hands and knees. Let's start moving through some cat-cows. So arching and rounding the spine, taking your time to notice anywhere that you're feeling some tension along your vertebrae. So all the, sitting at a desk on a computer that some of us might be doing, notice, what kind of impact is that happening, is happening in your spine? Do you have a good ergonomic setup at your house? Are you standing up to work some of the day? Okay, let's start swiveling around the pelvis. So imagine that you have a paintbrush on your tailbone and try to create big, huge circles on the wall behind you. So there's a lot of different ways that people can interpret pelvic circles. Some people do this, kind of where they circle their pelvis as if the front of your pubic bone is drawing a circle on the floor. So instead, imagine your tailbone drawing a circle on the wall behind you. And just free up. There's a lot of ligaments in your sacrum and your low back. So just start to free some stuff up. Now, I didn't tell you which direction to spin. So notice which direction you're spinning. This is probably a pattern you prefer in the body. Like if you were going to hula hoop, would this be the direction that your hips would go? All right, now change the other direction now. Okay, so spin your circles, open up. See if you can sense the low back, the sacroiliac joints, all the little spaces that you're trying to cultivate. How is your breath here? Are your elbows locked out? Do you feel weight evenly through your hands? All right, and then let's come down. We're gonna do child's pose in a couple of different ways. First, this is not the typical way. First, I want you to just round your back a lot and just come down. Might feel very awkward to be in a child pose like this, but just stretch chin toward chest. Let the upper back, the mid back start to have some space. And then come up to an arch, chin up, tailbone up. And this time we're gonna keep the tailbone up and stretch back to child's pose in a deep anterior tilt of the pelvis. Notice what is different here. Do you have deeper flexion in the hips now than you did before? And is the back a little bit more neutral? So let's try that one more time. Come up, arch the back, and round the spine. Keep the rounded spine. Roll back towards child's pose. Notice how your femur bones feel in the hip joints. Probably not as deep of a flexion as you felt before, but you have a lot of openness in the back of the vertebrae, but the vertebrae are very rounded. And then come back, arching the back. Keep the arch, tailbone tips up, sit bones high and wide. Come back, deep hip flexion of this. That's what I feel, much deeper hip flexion. My spine is much more neutral now, not rounded in any way. So just notice the different ways that your body moves. Come back up onto all fours, neutral spine. Take a deep breath in, reach the right arm up in the air, and slide that shoulder down to find a twist. So now we get to notice what the breath does here when we're moving our vertebrae and rib cage differently. Gaze toward the floor, let the base of the skull relax. Allow the femur bones to drop back toward the wall behind you. Deep breaths here. What does the bottom of the exhale feel like? Inhale, reach that arm all the way up to the sky again. Place the hand down onto the ground. Reach the other arm up, left arm, coming down, finding a twist here. Notice all the places that are changing their position in your body. Can you feel your neck soften? What happens in your rib cage, in your spine? How is your breathing? Is this direction of a twist more or less natural than the other direction of the twist? Get to know your favorites. How does your body like to move? This is really quality information so that you can find your way into new pathways. My father, who, bless him, is in his mid to late 80s, he told me that he's using this time to become left-handed, that he's bored. So he's been trying to do everything he can with his left hand. So, there's always time to develop new patterns in the body. Let's find an arch. And now let's come into dog pose. Bend your knees a lot. Lift the femur bones high and back. Spread open the bones of your feet. Root down into the index finger mounds, the thumb mounds. And just notice, what's happening? Can you feel your elbows bend? Can you feel your knees bend? Just a little bit. Maybe your knees want to bend a lot. So that's very good. Feel free to bend your knees as much as you want to. Extend the heart toward the pelvis. Feel the reach of your spine without locking your joints. Take a deep breath here. Pedal out your feet any way you want. So maybe the heel wants to drop, the other knee wants to bend. Maybe your hips want to come up and one down. Just see what's going to help you open things up, get into some spaciousness. And then once you find dog pose again, long exhales. hang out in your exhales here for a little bit. What does it feel like to just have that little teeny pause at the bottom of the breath? Does your inhale feel a little fresher when you've paid attention to the exhale and the bottom of the exhale? Does it feel more inviting? Does it feel more welcomed? Are you present for it? And let's walk our feet forward. Come into Uttanasana and bend your knees a lot. So make sure you're feeling that you're bending from the pelvis, not from the spine. We're going to review that in just a moment. Let the head dangle. Feel free to move your arms, your shoulders, your hips, any kind of freeing movement you want. Inhale for a halfway lift. Hands right at the roots of your thighs like we did on the floor. Soft bend in the knee. Spine gets longer. And then exhale and melt. Again, climb up, push off your feet. Come up to stand, reaching the arms if you want to the sky. And place your hands down at your heart. So look at me just for a moment. So there's a big difference between bending forward with your spine rounded, right? This was kind of like our child's pose that we did with our spine rounded. And this happens a lot when people try to bend forward. They bend from their back because their hamstrings are tight and kind of pulling their pelvis down. So instead, bend your knees. Okay, so stand it back up again. Notice if that didn't feel very good in your back. And now bend your knees and see if you can spill the bowl of soup of your pelvis forward, like your pubic bone can pass through the inner thighs back toward the wall behind you. The sit bones lift, the tailbone lifts. And so there's a much different sensation here when you bend from the pelvis instead of from the spine. Let the spine be a waterfall that cascades down from the tip of the tail. So we're moving the very, very, very bottom of our spine, the tailbone up, and letting the rest of the spine follow downward, like tipping a pitcher of water. Okay. So the knees have to bend to do this. Everybody try to straighten your legs here while you're this low. And notice your back starts to round. Your pelvis wants to go the other way. So when you do this, when you round, so come back to the way we don't want to be. If we round from the back, our tailbone pulls down toward the floor instead of lifting toward the sky. So now our tail and our spine are in opposition to each other. And they are one unit. They're all the spine. So we want them going in the same direction. So once again, lift the tailbone, bend your knees to allow that to happen. Feel how much looser your spine gets as you fall toward the floor. So remember this in our forward folding postures today, that we want the pelvis tipping forward into an anterior tilt. We want this tailbone and the spine moving in the same direction. Inhale for a halfway lift. Hold the tops of your thighs, the femur bones settling back in the joint will help the pelvis move. All right, and then bend your knees and come on up. So just look at me for one more second. If this is your pelvis, okay, and this is your femur bone, if we fix the femur bone way back in the joint, the pelvis can roll forward and create that anterior tilt. If we push the femur bone forward in the joint, the pelvis has a harder time rolling forward. So having the femur bones way back instead of pushed forward, so everybody push your hips forward and try to bend forward. You can't, right? So and we stand like this all the time. Often we push our hips forward. We can do it with two legs. We can do it with one leg. We push the hip forward, and this makes coming into an anterior tilt of the pelvis very, very difficult, if not impossible. So let's remember those two things through our practice today. The femur head's moving back and the pelvis moving into an anterior tilt, so the sit bones and the tailbone can follow the spine in the direction the spine wants to go. Inhale and lift your arms all the way to the sky. Find your breath. And then as you exhale, float forward, bend your knees. This is what allows that to happen. So don't worry about your knees bending. They can soften as much as you want. Halfway lift, because your legs are going straight, our spine is coming up now, so we can press the heads of the femur bones back. Melt one more time. Let's step our left foot back. Our right foot's going to stay forward, come to a lunge. If you have blocks, use them. If you don't, that's okay. All right, so find your lunge and let's start moving. So this is hard. So as we come into straighter legs, they don't have to go all the way straight. What's happening here? Feel your breath. Chest forward, knee bends. Exhale, straightening-ish the legs, squaring the hips. Even though we're trying to move through that anterior tilt, you can still hug the chin toward the chest to make sure the rest of your spine gets a stretch, or the rest of the muscles along your spine. So keep moving with the breath. Notice the exhales. Empty them out. One more time. Empty out your exhale all the way. Come back to your lunge. Find your breath. Let's go ahead and climb up. So it's okay to keep your hands on your hips or to your heart. It's okay to be less deep in this pose. It's okay to put your knee down in this pose. So find your variation that works best for your body. Find your breath again. And when we're ready, we're going to twist. So your hands can be on your hips to twist. Your arms can be out to the side to twist. Finding your way, twisting right. Drop the shoulders. Remember those skiers down from the base of the skull. Sliding down your shoulders. Deep breaths. What does the bottom of the exhale feel like in a twist? Rise back up. And then place your hands back down onto the floor or the blocks. Walk your back foot forward. Bend your knees. Inhale for a halfway lift. Hands can go on blocks or on shins or maybe on your thighs so you can really feel the heads of the femur bones draw back. Release and come back down. Second side, left foot forward, right foot back, coming to a lunge. Let's start moving here. Squaring the hips. It's okay if your leg doesn't come anywhere near straight. We're just trying to open the channels. So breathing. I like to exhale as I straighten my legs. Maybe you like to do that. Maybe you like to do the opposite. It's all good no matter what you want to do. Remember your back knee, even here, can come onto the floor. What's the bottom of your exhale feel like? Do you enjoy emptying yourself out? All right, let's go ahead and come into a lunge again. Climb up. You get to choose where you want to be. High with your knee, not bent very much. Deep lunge, knee on the floor lunge. Hands up, hands down. Find your breathing, drop the shoulders, let your skiers slide down. And then we're gonna twist to the left. So if your arms are up, you can bring them out to the side. If your hands are on your hips, you can keep them there. Finding your breath. Notice what changes when you're twisting. Of course, your obliques are working a little harder and they're in resistance to the diaphragm. So perhaps the breath is a little bit more challenged. Can you still feel the bottom of the exhale? All right, and then bring your arms back up. Place the hands down onto the ground. Let's come back to a plank. You can put your knees down onto the floor. You can have your legs up off the floor. Whatever is right for your shoulders, your body, your breath. Come into the breath. What does it feel like to hug to the deep center on your exhales now? Draw a lot of energy into the waist on your exhales. What does it feel like to move the heads of the femur bones in the hip joints up toward the sky? All right, and come down, put your knees toward the floor, and slowly lower yourself down to the ground. Cobra pose. Open chest. Enjoy exercising, strengthening those muscles along your spine. As you come up, breathe in. As you exhale, let your body softly come back down. When we do this one more time, remember not to hold the breath at the top. It's so easy to kind of hang out with a held breath up here. Make sure you exhale all the way down. Put your hands underneath your head. Pick up your feet. Rock left and right. Just take a moment. Let your back be nourished. Feel the ease in which your femur bones roll around in the hip joints.
Hopefully it feels easy. Maybe it doesn't feel easy, especially if you've had a hip replacement or just have some issues with your hip. Just notice what's there. Heads, pause that, feet down. If you're comfortable, stay here. And just take a moment to notice the breath rolling down the spine. Can you imagine that your spine is bobbling on the breath, like the breath is the ocean and the spine is driftwood bobbling on the sea? How mobile, how adaptable your spine is, breath by breath. Okay. Come up onto all fours. Deep anterior tilt of the pelvis. So we're not rounding back. We're going to lift our sit bones wide and come back to child's pose here. Root the thigh bones. Lengthen through your spine. Relax your head. And then we're going to come up to dog pose. Spread out the hands and the feet. Bend your knees as much as you want. Lift the kneecaps up into the hips. So you're lifting the shaft of the femur bones up, and then draw the heads of the femur bones back. Feel them nestle in the back edge of the joint. Feel the spine grow here. Doesn't matter how straight your legs get. You can stretch your hamstrings with your knees bent. So feel it. Lift your sit bones. You'll feel your hamstrings stretch. Stretch your heels back toward the wall behind you and down. You'll feel your calves stretch, even with your knees bent. So it's a mistake to think that you have to have straight legs to stretch the backs of your legs. Breathing here, long spine. All right, let's go ahead and lift the right leg up in the air. Hips are square here. Extend. Can you get the left hip to feel as though the head of the femur bone is moving up and back? So while you're here, the standing leg, the left leg, lift the femur bone up and back. Deep breaths. Exhale all your air out, knee to nose. Forceful exhale. Inhale, back up. Exhale, forceful exhale. Push those last bits out. Inhale, bring it back. This time we get to plant our foot forward, come to a lunge. You can always make that transition a lot differently. If you don't like swinging your leg through, put your knees down, come up, and then bring your foot forward. Okay, you get to decide whether you want blocks or not. This time we're going to shorten up our stance. So our right foot is forward, our left foot is back, but our stance is here instead of in a big long lunge. Okay. Chairs or couches can be very helpful for this next posture too if we want. All right, let's lift up, find your breath, your arms come up over your head or hands on your hips. Maybe take your right foot out to the right a little bit more if you need some space. Inner thighs roll back, stretch your spine forward. Let this knee, your right knee, soften a little bit so it's not hypermobile. Bring your hands to rest on blocks, on your couch, on a chair, on a table, wherever you're going. So you can, adjust where you are in your room so you have something to put your hands on. See what it feels like to lift the femur bone up into the hip joint and stretch your hip back. So we're squaring our hips by lifting the right femur bone up and back. Breathe deeply. Extending the spine. So now you should be getting a good stretch in the hamstring. Root the heel down and pull the heel back a little bit. So there's a little stretch flex in the hamstring. All right, and then walk your back foot forward. Inhale for a halfway lift. Spine gets longer, sit bones are lifting. Exhale, melting. Tip the pelvis forward like spilling a bowl of soup down the front of your legs. The pubic bone passes through the inner thighs. The sit bones widen and lift. Bend your knees as much as you need to for the forward fold. Inhale one more time, halfway lift. Exhale, hands down onto the ground, back to dog pose. Here you go. Extending, lengthening. Your knees can bend, femur bones up and back. Find your breath here. Hold your hands and hug them toward each other so you stabilize through your torso. This time we're going to lift the left leg up in the air. Extend that leg, square the hips. Try not to let the left leg lift higher than it needs to. So you want your right femur bone to lift up, 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 and back.
Stabilize through that leg. Breathe into the reach of the leg in the air. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, knee to nose. Forcefully letting all the air go. Inhale, bring it back. Exhale, knee to nose. One more time. We're going to transition and bring that leg forward. So do that however is best suited for you. Blocks are so great. Chairs are so great. Couches are so great. Coffee tables are so great. Have your hands on something. The higher you go, the more capacity you have to lengthen your spine. So when we go low, we start to do that rounding thing and we lose the anterior tilt of the pelvis. Root into the front big toe as you lift the femur bone back, back, back. So with your left foot, root the big toe and the left shaft of the femur bone lifts up and back in the hip joint. Extend the spine. Find the breath again. Long, smooth exhales. All right. As you breathe here, try to see what it feels like to hug the heel down and back, extending through the spine. All right, and then come on up. You can bring your arms up to the sky if you want, or out, or anywhere you want them to be. Go ahead and walk your back forward. So now you need to find a piece of furniture. A couch will do. There's lots that can do. I'm going to use this table for this. You can also, if you don't have any furniture, you can do this with the strap in the air. So I'm going to stand on my right foot and I'm going to bring my left heel onto my table. So you could do this on a couch. You could do this on the edge if you want a little higher, on the edge of a couch, on the edge of a chair, so wherever you go, okay? So when we come into this posture, it's very easy to push this hip forward. So can you see it pretty easily on me, that pushing this hip forward. Notice the head of my hip joint is now over my, arch instead of over my heel. So see what it feels like to draw the head of the femur bone, instead of pushing it forward, draw the head of the femur bone back. And it might make you feel a little off balance. Soften the knee, reach both arms up in the air. Extending the spine. Try not to let your knee joints take the burden of this posture. Feel the length of your spine. Keep rooting the thigh bone back as best as you can instead of pushing it forward. Full breaths here, and we're going to twist. Okay, so we're going to twist to the side. Twist toward your leg. Your hands can be on your hips. Finding your breath. Notice if you get lazy and push that hip forward, take the thigh bone back, soften the knee. Reach the crown, reach the foot, find that push, yield into the floor. So yield into the floor and then root through the crown of your foot, or crown of your head. And then back to center we go. And let's change sides. So as you come into the second side, notice, did you have the good height? Do you want some different height? Okay. If your hip tends to push forward, this is really common in our standing leg, when we're standing on one leg. Notice if your hip pushes forward, take the thigh bone back and soften the knee that you're standing on. Try not to let it push back and hyperextend. Find the reach of your spine. Drop the hip in the air. Let it settle down toward the floor. Reach if you want with your arms, but at the very least, reach with your crown. Feel the extension from your heel to your head. Feel the root to rise. So yield into the earth. Push off the earth, feel that rebound, reaching up all the way through your crown. Is your femur bone back? Can you feel your exhales? Let's twist. Okay, so arms can be out, hand can be on your leg. You can take a strap even and put a strap around your foot so you have a strap to hold on to. There's so many variations. When you twist, notice if you push the pelvis forward. Take the top of that thigh bone back and soften the knee. Reach the crown and tail. The foot in the air, press through the big toe and the inner heel. And then let's come back around. Whatever you just put your foot on, put both your hands on now. So it can be the couch, the chair, the table. Bend your knees, extending the spine, finding your breath. So as you bend your knees a lot, instead of having them straight, and notice if the anterior tilt of the pelvis is possible. Pass the pubic bone through, lift the sit bones and widen them. Feel the extension through your spine. Heads of the femur bones nestling into the back edge of the joint. Find your exhales. Okay, let's take a step back forward. Okay, come on up. Reaching the arms to the sky. Lean back, counter all the forward bending. Open your chest and then bend your knees. Grab onto a block if you want. You don't have to have a block, and you can also use the edge of a couch or something. We're going to have our right foot forward and our left foot back. Come off your tightrope and come on to train tracks. Extend the spine, reach your arms. If they feel comfortable up in the air, keep them on your hips. If they don't, you choose. Because our right foot is forward, we're going to keep the left arm lifting. Right hand comes onto the hip now. Extend forward and bring your hand onto a block. Maybe you need more height than that. Maybe you need to put your hand on the edge of a chair or the couch or a table. So you decide how deep into the posture your body can stand. Internally rotate the thighs, still passing the pubic bone through, widening the sit bones, lengthening the spine. Root into both feet without locking the knees. Start to twist. When you're ready, you can reach that arm in the air. Slide the skiers down your neck to the edges of your shoulders. Stay rooted through the right big toe mound as you reach the femur bone deep into the back pocket of the hip joint. Make sure your knees are not taking the brunt of your posture. How is your breath now? Can you feel the little edge at the bottom of the exhale? Because we're twisting, there's a little effort to the exhale. All right, and then release and bring your hands back down onto the ground. Come back up, reach the arms, lean back a little teeniest bit. Maybe your hands are on your hips to do this. And then walk your back foot forward and change sides. Other foot comes back, block or something is on the inside edge of your left foot. Stay grounded through your left big toe. Reach your heart, extend, lift through the front body. Maybe both arms are up, maybe both arms are down. We're gonna complete that with your left hand on your hip and your right arm in the air, extending forward, lengthening, finding your way. Take your hand on any support. It can be on a table, it can be on a chair, the couch, anything you have. Place your hand on it and extend the spine. Don't go into your twist yet until you figure out your pelvis and your legs. Internally rotate the thighs. Pass the pubic bone through. Widen the sit bones. Notice if your hip wants to pop out to the side. If it does, hug it back in. Can you extend the spine before twisting? Inhale to feel the reach of the spine. Exhale to twist into the pose. Try not to lock the knees. Stay rooted through the left big toe mound as you nestle the femur bone back into the hip joint. Find your breath. And adjust the pose any way you want to adjust the pose. Maybe your hand comes in the air, maybe your hand stays on your hip. If you find your hip sticking out to the side, keep drawing it in. Keep checking in with the rooting of your feet, the softness of your knee joints. Can you find that yield push, and can the push go all the way through your crown? Okay, and then let's release. Come out of that posture. Come all the way up. Arms to the sky. Lean back. Hands to your hips. Lean back. You choose. And then walk your back foot forward. Reach your arms up. Cactus, open your arms if it feels good. Feel the back body engage a bit. Exhale, bend your knees and round forward. Let's go ahead and come onto our seat for a moment. Okay. So we're going to do a couple of forward folds, seated forward folds. Be very careful with this. Actually, come back up. I'm sorry. Let's do this first. Come back up. I apologize for making you get down and back up. But I want you to just get one more time without putting our foot on the chair, what it feels like to not have the head of the femur bone pushing forward. Okay, so we're just going to stand in a stork pose with our knee up.
No, I mean, you can hold on to something with your hands if you want to, but just find some balance. And notice if this standing hip wants to pop out to the side, or if the standing hip wants to push forward. One of those two things, and sometimes both, want to happen to expand our balance capacity. So take the femur bone back, soften the knee, hug the hip in. Feel the reach of the spine. Where do you want your arms? Do you want them down, out, up? You decide what's giving you the best capacity for feeling that rootedness in the pelvis to give you the length of the spine. All right, and then let's release our foot down and change sides. Standing on your opposite foot, make sure your hip does not pop out to the side. Okay, so when we stand up, we often kind of want to lean into, we want to lock something. We want to lock our knee, we want to lock our hip, we want to push it forward or sink it out. So hip in, thigh back, knee soft. Find your breath. Maybe see what's here. Do you want your arms out? Sometimes out can be, like a balance stick, like people walk on a tightrope with that big long rod. Your arms can become the rod for balance. Perhaps you want your arms in the air to help you feel that extension through the spine. So just keep the femur bone moving back, keep the knees soft so you're not locked out, and just find your pose. How is your breath now? Can you feel the exhales? All right, and then let's release. Put your foot down. Put your hands on whatever prop you got. Bend your knees a lot, like dog pose, but with our hands on something instead of the floor. Extending the spine. You can soften your knees. You can straighten your knees. Just don't lock the knees. See what it feels like to take the femur bones back. All right, now we get to come to the floor. I promise we'll go the other direction in just a moment. We'll do a back bend to counter all this. But I just want you to experiment with forward bend. So being on the edge of a blanket can mean all the difference in being able to have that anterior tip of the pelvis instead of rolling back. So a lot of times we tend to roll the pelvis back and round. The forward fold kind of looks something like this. And then we're back to the same thing we were doing earlier, where we're losing the anterior tilt of the pelvis. So get up on as much height as you want, move the flesh of your buttocks out of the way so you can feel your sit bones, and practice just rolling back, rolling forward. Let the forward roll, the anterior tilt be your starting place. Lift up, maybe you want a strap for Paschimottanasana, maybe you don't. I do, so I'm gonna use one. Find the length of your spine. So this posture isn't about, rounding yourself so that you can touch your nose to your knees. So this is bound to make the lower spine, your vertebrae, your discs really, get a little cranky. So if you can keep a little neutral curve in the low back by anterior tilting the pelvis, lift the heart, broaden the collarbones, slide your skiers down your shoulders, and come forward to wherever your body says go. Flex the toes. Don't push your knees down. So remember, we're trying to be soft in our knee joints. Instead, press the heads of the femur bones down. Deep breaths. Resist the urge to go further than your body wants you to go. Find your exhales. Wherever you ended up, see what it feels like to drop the chin. Not round the spine and roll the pelvis back. Keep the neutral spine, the anterior tilt of the pelvis, and just tuck the chin. Find your exhales. All right, and then let's go ahead and come out of there. And we need to counter after forward folds. A lot of people's spines, if you have trouble with your lumbar spine, if you have disc issues in your lumbar spine, often forward folds and twists can be very difficult for you. So hopefully the skillful means of today's class will teach you a way to get to your postures without overdoing it or doing it in a way that bothers your back. Take a block if you have one for a passive version of this if you want. You don't need to. You can be very active in this bridge pose. As a matter of fact, active might be better considering what we've done. Heels in, come on up,
Rock onto the tops of your shoulders. Let your arms move into the floor. Once again, don't lock out your elbows by pushing so hard with your hands. Maybe loosen your hands and push through your upper arms instead. See what it feels like to snug up across your sacrum, feeling that sense of condensement and compaction around your sacrum. Feel the roots of your feet, the 4 points of each foot, big toe, pinky toe mounds, inner outer heels. Notice if you have dominance. If there's one side that feels much surer than the other, if you're leaning into one foot more than the other. How's your exhales now? Let your belly fall, empty itself out all the way on your exhales. Make sure your neck is happy. Look up at the ceiling instead of anywhere else. Keep the neutral cervical spine. All right, and then let's go ahead and come down onto the ground. Rest your spine on the floor. Bend your knees. You can adjust them a little bit wherever you're needing to. And now imagine you have hands on your knees, moving the weight of your femur bones down toward the pelvis. Root the thigh bones. All right, so a good way to practice, I want to do leg up the wall pose, but in a slightly different way. And I'm not sure what everybody has available to them in their house. So I'm going to show you a couple of things and you decide which way you want to be. Okay. So if you felt like the back bend really helped kind of neutralize your spine, then try this way. Okay. So we're going to take a blanket to a skinny fold. You can even have two. If you have some firm blankets at home, you can use pillows too if you want. You can have one or two in a height. Obviously, two is going to be a bigger pose than one. You're going to come close to a wall. All right, so with leg up the wall pose, with this variation anyway, you want to have a little gap between the wall and the blankets. I use my blocks to create that gap, so I put them on either side, so there's space in between the blocks for my pelvis to drop down. So you're going to come into the pose by climbing toward the wall, rolling your shoulder down, and coming on up with your legs up the wall. So now my pelvis is kind of dropping down into the pocket behind the blankets. So I'm in a little bit of an anterior tilt here, and my femur bones can drop a little deeper into the hip joints. So gravity's helping me now keep the femur bones dropping down. So if you can manage this, this is a great way of doing the pose after what we've just done. If this feels way too complicated, then you can just put your legs up the wall with nothing underneath you. And if you don't have a wall and you have a couch, you can do the exact same thing. You can have blankets not right up against so that you have a little gap for your pelvis. And I've never done this with my couch before, so we'll see how it goes. But you want the pelvis, you can probably see me better, you want the pelvis to drop down just a little teeniest of bits. So this is not in the middle of your low back. It's kind of like under the top edge of your sacrum. So the tailbone and the sit bones can just have a slight tilting, okay? So whichever way you feel comfortable, and if you don't want to do it this way, you can have nothing underneath you and just be neutral on the floor. Okay, so you decide, experiment. If you have the props to experiment with, take some deep breaths. So if you are choosing the blankets, make sure you feel comfortable, supported. Can you feel that you're still in that slight anterior tilt, just slight? You don't want to have a big back bend arch, just enough to neutralize. And if you're on the floor, what does your pelvis feel like? Can you settle here? So whether your legs are on a couch or a wall, this is our opportunity to just drop into the emptiness of the breath. So once you're comfortable, let go of your alignment and just find yourself coming into your exhales. Pour the exhales out like a slow pitcher of water. Notice that pause, that silent, quiet, empty place before you inhale again. And we're going to turn this posture into Shavasana. So if you're really check in and be honest with your body, or let your body be honest with you, with your mind. If you're very comfortable and you don't feel like you need something different, you can stay right here for the next few minutes. If you feel like you need to be more flat or you need a little twist or a little something something before Shavasana, then now's your time to come out of here and take a moment either to rock around or twist from side to side, whatever your body is feeling like it needs. Okay, maybe a little Supta Baddha Konasana, anything that your body's needing. Let's just take a moment to settle again after you kind of work the kinks out into Shavasana. So you can be flat on your back, you can be still with your legs up the wall, you can be on your side, you can have support underneath your knees. So whatever you're choosing to do, all is good. Make sure you find comfort in your body. Okay, so this is all about what's making you feel good, able to feel the emptiness of Shavasana. So once again, return to the breath. This time you get to empty the whole body out. So what can you give away? Can you give away your arms? Can you give away your palms? Can you give away your femur bones? Just give everything to the earth. Just let her hold. Give away your shins. What does it feel like to give your spine over, your pelvis? Can you give away your breath? Let the exhales leave you freely. What tension in the body can you freely surrender? What tension pattern in the mind can you freely surrender? As you begin to be aware of the breath again,
Can you notice the suspension of time, very quiet place, the very bottom of your exhale? Emptiness of thought can often live there. Enjoy the return of the breath when you inhale. Enjoy giving the breath away as you exhale. Emptiness, emptiness upon emptiness. The world is fleeting of form, empty of permanence, void of surety, without certainty. Like a breath breathed once and gone, all things rise and fall. Understand emptiness, and tranquility replaces anxiety. Understand emptiness, and compassion replaces jealousy. Understand emptiness, and you will cease to excuse suffering and begin to alleviate it. Slowly begin to come into movement. Small movement, big movement, any movement, no movement. Let's find our way eventually onto our side. And use your arms to help yourself upright. Let's bring our palms together at our heart. Take a deep breath in. Let the exhale go. Offer your intentions outward now. So share your energy on that exhale. Give away all of your presence, your compassion, your tranquility, and just freely share. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.